Welcome, everybody. It's the Wednesday edition of the Daily Recap. Want to wish everybody a good morning. I am your host, Jason Butt with UGAsports.com. We're about to dive into what's going on with UGA football at the moment. Obviously, the number one team in the nation has a bit of a tune-up game this week against Kent State. But speaking of the Golden Flashes, let's start with their head coach, Sean Lewis. Now, I have to say, I haven't laughed this hard at a quote in a while, and it's not because anything was said untrue. There was just two schools of thought that came to my mind. Now, listen, I am not somebody who thinks you should get ahead by sucking up in this world. I don't know if that's the intent. It's just what we saw with the quote. But, when you see this, you're just kind of thinking to yourself, okay, we're 3 games into a season. Like we don't proclaim people national champs yet. We're still in the, hey, they got this, and this to accomplish and do. It's like the old Denny Green clip where he freaked out after the game. Where he's like, you want to crown them, then crown them. That's what this reminds me of right now. Obviously, Kent State's coach, he's got to psych his guys up, and he wants to put it out there that Georgia's this unbeatable team. So the other head coach that's playing Georgia says this on Tuesday, quote, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say it's the greatest collection of talent that's ever been assembled on a football team because of the work Coach Smart, his staff, and the tireless, relentless effort that they've put into building a program to an elite level. That to me is one of two things. Either old Sean Lewis thinks that Georgia truly is one of the greatest teams of all time 3 games in after beating a pretty good Oregon team, FCS Samford, and a not-so-good South Carolina team, or he's looking to network and he's looking to say some things to make himself look good and feel good for these guys as an up-and-coming coach. Kudos to you for trying to play the game. I'm personally not a fan of the sucking up. Don't know if that's what he's doing. He could also, a little bit of motivation and telling the media, these guys are unbeatable. We got our work cut out for them. It just doesn't read like that, though. So I've just been laughing for a while thinking, man, crown them. Just crown them, man. Okay, so, when you think about it, when you think about the game, I don't think anybody this isn't a situation where you got Marshall coming into Notre Dame and you're like, 20 and a half point underdogs for Marshall, or I should really say 20 and a half point favorites. I'm going to go bet Notre Dame like me, the moron that I was. This is what I think I saw 46 and a half points. I would not be surprised if Georgia covers. That is a pretty big line. Obviously, the last time they were huge favorites this season, they did not cover against Samford. Lack of focus, as we've all gone over, just kind of a little bit of the hangover. I don't expect that this week. I think 46 and a half points is close, though. That's a tough one for me. I'm probably going to stay away. Georgia did me a big favor this last week on with the 24 and a half. Was able to actually make a decent amount of money off of Georgia, knowing that was the line that you just had to take. I recommended taking that. I'm not sure 46 and a half. We'll see how I feel probably closer to game time. That's not one I'm looking to touch. That's a little too much, especially considering they beat Samford by 33. You just don't know. And also when it gets down to the fourth quarter and they put Brock Vandegrift and maybe even Gunnar Stockton in, I think by that point you're just thinking to yourself, they're going to get out the game. They're going to run it out. That's just kind of how they've done it so far. With those guys, when you look at the 3 games, once Vandegrift's in the game, they're not really scoring, and that leads me to this point. We're going to transition. We go from we go from the greatest collection of talent ever assembled in the history of college football to what about this quarterback? We got obviously Stetson Bennett's the starter, but he's done after this year. So who's the next quarterback? Logical person is Carson Beck. He's been there the longest. He has he's looked really well, actually. He's played really well. so far, in just the time he's gotten. He was 5 of 6 with a touchdown this past game. I think he had something similar when he came in against Oregon. So you really like what Carson Beck has done so far, especially against a Pac-12 team that went and beat BYU handily, showing that maybe Oregon isn't as bad. And I didn't think Oregon was as bad as a lot of voters did by knocking them out of the top 25 because they lost to Georgia. I thought that was kind of silly. I just think Georgia's that good. Oregon is still a good team. They're just not on that level that Georgia's on right now. So, you look at this and it's tough. Carson Beck played well. Brock Vandegrift's behind him. Gunnar Stockton. The last time Georgia coaching staff raved about a quarterback running the scout team, Stetson Bennett. Remember, go back to that Rose Bowl a few years ago in Georgia's the first time they made a run at the national championship when they ended up losing to Alabama. When they were about to play Oklahoma in the Rose Bowl leading up to that game, it was Stetson Bennett running the scout team. Mel Tucker was I wish I had the quote in front of me right now. Mel Tucker said something to the effect of, "Oh, man, that's a bad man. That guy's great. Stetson Bennett's running circles around guys." And I think at the time we were like, okay, whatever. They were basically calling him Baker Mayfield. That's what he did. He pretended he scouted. He was the scout team. He was Baker Mayfield. He was wearing number 6 in practice, giving them a good look. Obviously, Georgia had to adjust in the second half to finally clamp down on Baker Mayfield in that game. But part of their preparation was Stetson Bennett getting them ready. Stetson Bennett kept this, doing some scout team work. Once he came back, I believe maybe he did, maybe he did. I don't know. But he was definitely a scout team as a scout team quarterback when he was a freshman at Georgia. Well, Gunnar Stockton, man, check out what Kirby Smart and then Dan Jackson too. They were talking about they were talking about just how good Gunnar Stockton has been so far. And let's see let me pull up the quote real quick. Again, I'm trying to stall here because my computer's going really slow, but here we go. Finally got it. Kirby Smart said, quote, "Poise, great arm talent. He's probably played since being on the scout team. He hasn't had to deal with the information overload. A lot of times you find out a lot about a guy on the scout team because he is looking at a card. There's no thought process. There's no, I have to say this, I have to do this. You take the robot out and you play." That's Kirby. That's as good of a Kirby Smart quote about a player as I've seen in quite a while. When you're just talking about somebody's raw ability and just kind of God-given talent that he's talking about here, because like he said, he is trying to simulate what the other team does every week in practice. That's what Gunnar Stockton's doing as a scout team quarterback, and it's not absorbed. You're not trying to immerse yourself in the Georgia playbook. Not trying to immerse yourself in the other team's defense. You're studying the other team's offense for the most part. And so the fact that Gunnar Stockton is doing that and doing so well and really showing out with that ability makes you wonder about next year, because they came into this year knowing Stetson Bennett's the guy and they could afford for Gunnar Stockton to be on that scout team. And so, I'll be very interested to see what happens in that sophomore leap to see if he makes a run at it. Granted, dude, Carson Beck has looked great. I mean, I have been very, very impressed. And he obviously came back this year as a number 2 when he could have transferred and gone somewhere to be a starting quarterback, hands down, based on what we've seen so far. So I'll be interested. I want to see if Stockton can make a push next year at Carson Beck and possibly make a run at really Brock Vandegrift and then possibly Carson Beck. I think that'll be an interesting quarterback competition. Now, I will say it's fine. I want to go back to the Sean Lewis thing because I kind of got sidetracked there because Kirby Smart was asked about Kent State's Sean Lewis, what he said, and Smart kind of laughed about it and said Sean Lewis is probably watching last year's tape saying that, because there were a lot of really good players on that team last year this team, we were young. We have a lot of mistakes and a lot of things we need to clean up. I get it. If I was him, I'd be saying the same thing, but I know different. I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean, Sean Lewis knows he's in for he knows he's in for it. They obviously scheduled the game a few years ago, knowing that this would be a very tough game. I don't think anybody, when this game was scheduled, probably 4 or 5 years ago, would have thought that Georgia would be would be neck and neck with Alabama when it comes to talent and just be doing the things that they're doing right now. But man, like it's just a little bit much to get out there and say that, especially as a football head coach. I mean, come on now, just funny to me. I want to touch on Dan Jackson real quick. I want to talk about him because he's a guy who he's kind of, I don't want to say lost in the shuffle, but he's definitely he played a lot last year, had a chance to start this year, and then here comes Malachi Starks. And so I think there are a lot of guys. I don't want to go make that assumption here, but there are guys who they don't keep their starting spots and they leave, and they may have thought that they were entitled to those spots. Much like anything in life, nothing is guaranteed. And so while you feel for some people in those situations, you also have to know it's something that you have to expect with anything. You could think that you're in line. It could be you think you're getting a job promotion and then it doesn't happen and you wonder why and you make excuses and this and that. It's just some things in life just aren't fair. And I think, if you're Dan Jackson, you think you finally did everything right, finally got your break. You came in as a walk-on, and then here comes this super talented freshman, and day one, he essentially is the starter back there. Now, that said, Dan Jackson's still getting plenty of playing time, so it's not like he's just, cast off to the side or anything. Now, but here's the thing, that kid's playing his tail off, and when he's in there, well, Malachi Starks has got 2 picks. Here comes Dan Jackson getting his first career pick this past week against South Carolina, and so he was able to speak to the media on Tuesday, and he was asked about getting that first interception, and Dan Jackson said, quote, "Obviously, it was a big deal for me. It was my first one. I am really proud of. First off, we got great pressure from our defensive line, like we had been getting all game. We had them rattled. Spencer Rattler made a rush decision thanks to our defensive line once the ball was in the air. I work on that every day, and I tried to high point the ball. Thankfully, I came down with it." That is awesome. You like to see these guys who bring it every day in practice get rewarded, guys who old school wise move up the depth chart. It's one of those things what's really, really interesting about this Georgia team, for as talented as they are. They have 2 players on this team and really other guys too. It's not like it's interesting. Maybe it's because Alabama's a little further along in their roster building process than Georgia is. Saban's been doing this since 2007 over there, whereas Kirby Smart didn't get there till 2016. So it's definitely an NCAA 14 video game style roster where it's just you don't have walk-ons getting major playing time or former walk-ons for that matter. So Georgia's got all this 5-star and 4-star talent, high 4-star I should say, on the roster. Giving major snaps, playing major roles. And then you got the quarterback was a former 2-star guy with maybe 10 to 12 offers, no major offers whatsoever. You got Dan Jackson, who had to walk on at Georgia, no major offers. And then Ladd McConkey didn't get a major offer until pretty late in the process. You've got so you got those 3 guys who are really contributing to a big part of why Georgia's been successful. I think that wrinkle adds something to this story. I think for a lot of fans, it really resonates because not only do you have this collection of excellent talent, but then you have a couple of guys who kind of represent the everyman. And I think there's a little bit of Georgia, just kind of like the history of the program and the lore. I guess maybe it's because it doesn't have that dynastic history. It's 1980 and then 2021. So you definitely had years where you had those lunch pail walk-on types or guys who were overlooked and got a look late. But I just have to say we've gone over Stetson Bennett's story a million times, and honestly, it's hard to really compliment the staff because it took them forever to realize that he was actually the best quarterback they had. So you almost, and I think, and I say that knowing that probably Kirby Smart and Todd Monken would agree with that statement. That it's like, oh yeah, well, we overlooked all the intangibles he had because of certain tangibles. But the fact that they evaluated Dan Jackson enough to be like, you know what, he's a walk-on, and then evaluated him in practice really enough to be like, okay, he doesn't have the prototypical traits, but we're going to bring him in as a walk-on, get him in the program, and then to let him evaluate him week in, week out, and to the point where he actually plays and contributes. I think that says a lot about this coaching staff, because I know for a fact, because I've seen it having covered teams before, and even in the NFL level, the favoritism is a real thing among coaches, where if a position coach goes after a high star guy, they land him, you're going to kind of gravitate toward that player. When NFL coaches are really high on players coming in the draft and they end up taking them, they kind of gravitate toward those guys way more than the undrafted rookies, not necessarily paying much time to those guys, those camp bodies, if you will. So the fact that Dan Jackson was able to work his way, flash, and get playing time, the way Ladd McConkey as a 3-star recruit was able to, and that's a little bit different because he came in on scholarship, but still, the fact that you don't really see that. I shouldn't say. I mean, you just don't see it as much at Georgia compared to other places. I mean, you look at some of the other schools that you're not seeing these guys maybe get as many chances. And I could be painting that with a broad brush. That's just me. It is definitely from outside looking in, but I think that's really cool. I think it's a really cool thing that Georgia has this crazy amount of talent, yet they still have those cool stories with these guys that are contributing. Contributed to a national championship and possibly another one as they move on, given that they have the greatest semblance of talent ever in the history of college football, according to the Kent State head coach. And with that, I will leave you right there on this wonderful Wednesday. So until tomorrow morning, this is Jason Butt with UGAsports.com, and this has been the Daily Recap. Y'all take care and have a great day.